It was just another chilly evening at the diner. The kind of night where the air outside carried a crisp bite, and the warmth inside felt like a small escape from the world. The soft hum of conversation blended with the clinking of plates, and the smell of fresh coffee drifted through the air. Amidst the usual crowd of regulars and tired travelers, a man pushed open the door, his clothes worn, his hands rough from the cold. He hesitated for a moment before stepping inside, his gaze scanning the room, searching for something, or maybe someone. At the far end of the counter, Emily, a young waitress in her mid-20s, was refilling a cup of coffee when she noticed him. She had worked here long enough to recognize when someone wasn't just stopping in for a quick meal, but rather searching for something deeper. Maybe kindness, maybe just a moment of dignity. The man took a slow step forward, careful, almost as if he didn't want to disturb the normal rhythm of the place. Other customers shot quick glances at him before turning back to their meals. But Emily didn't look away. She had always believed that no one deserved to be invisible. With a warm smile, she walked over. "Hey there, can I get you something to eat?" she asked gently. The man looked startled, as if he wasn't used to being spoken to with kindness. He hesitated before clearing his throat. I don't have enough money," he admitted, his voice low, almost ashamed. Emily didn't even think twice. "Don't worry about it. Tonight, it's on me," she said with a reassuring nod before heading toward the kitchen. As she placed the order, she could hear whispers from a few tables nearby. Some people murmured about how he probably didn't deserve it, how he should just get a job. But Emily tuned them out. She had grown up watching her mother struggle to put food on the table, and she knew that life wasn't always as simple as people made it seem. When she brought the steaming plate of food back, the man's hands trembled slightly as he picked up the fork. He looked up at her, his eyes filled with something unspoken. Gratitude, maybe even disbelief. "Thank you," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. Emily just smiled. "Everyone deserves a warm meal," she replied before heading off to check on other tables. She didn't think much more about it. In her mind, she had just done what any decent person should do. But what she didn't know was that this small act of kindness was about to change her life in a way she never could have imagined. Days passed, and Emily almost forgot about the encounter, until one afternoon when the same man returned. But this time, something was different. He wasn't wearing the same tattered clothes. There was a spark in his eyes, a quiet confidence in the way he carried himself, and in his hands, he held something unexpected. What happened next left Emily completely speechless. Emily froze for a moment as she recognized the man standing at the entrance of the diner. He looked different. His clothes were clean, his posture straighter, and there was a quiet determination in his eyes that hadn't been there before. But what truly caught her attention was what he held in his hands, a small envelope. She wiped her hands on her apron and walked toward him, curiosity mixing with a hint of nervousness. "Hey, good to see you again," she said with a warm smile, though she couldn't shake the feeling that something unexpected was about to happen. The man nodded, his fingers tightening around the envelope. "I wanted to see you," he said, his voice steady, but filled with something deep, something unspoken. He hesitated for a second before extending the envelope toward her. "This is for you." Emily blinked in surprise. "For me?" She hesitated before taking it, feeling the weight of the moment settle around them. The diner's usual buzz of conversation and clinking dishes seemed to fade into the background as she carefully opened the envelope. Inside was a neatly folded piece of paper, and Cash. More than she had ever seen at one time. Her heart pounded as she looked back up at him. I don't understand. The man gave a small, almost shy smile. You probably don't remember me, he started, glancing down as if collecting his thoughts. Years ago, I wasn't always like this. He gestured vaguely toward himself. I had a business, a home, a life that seemed stable. But life doesn't always go the way we plan. Emily listened, completely drawn in. I lost everything after a series of bad investments and personal tragedies. My world fell apart so fast, I didn't even have time to catch my breath. One day, I went from having an office to sleeping on the streets. He exhaled deeply, as if reliving the pain. People stopped seeing me. They looked away, crossed the street, pretended I wasn't there. Do you know what that feels like? His voice was quieter now. Emily swallowed hard, nodding slightly. She didn't know exactly what it was like, but she understood enough. That night when I walked into this diner, he continued, I had given up. I hadn't eaten in days, and I wasn't sure I wanted to keep going. Then he paused, his eyes meeting hers. You treated me like a person. You didn't ask questions. You didn't make me feel ashamed. You just showed kindness. Emily felt a lump form in her throat. She had never imagined that such a small act could mean so much. I told myself that if I ever got back on my feet, I would find you, he said, with a small determined nod. And now, I have. Emily's hands trembled slightly as she looked down at the money again. But this is too much, he smiled. It's not about the money. It's about what you gave me. Hope, a reason to believe that not everyone looks away. He stepped back slightly, giving her space. This is my way of saying thank you. Emily was still in shock, her emotions swirling too fast to process. She had spent so many nights worrying about rent, about bills, about whether she could afford to fix her car that kept breaking down. And now, standing here in the middle of the diner, she was holding something that could change everything. But before she could find the right words, something else happened. A voice from behind interrupted the moment. What's going on here? Emily turned to see her boss, Mr. Reynolds, watching them with narrowed eyes. He was a tough man, the kind who ran the diner like a well-oiled machine, always focused on business. And from the way he was looking at the envelope in her hands, he clearly didn't like what he was seeing. Is there a problem? The man asked, his tone polite but firm. Mr. Reynolds crossed his arms. I don't like surprises in my diner, he said coolly, especially when it involves my employees taking money from customers. Emily's stomach tightened. It's not like that, she quickly explained. That this is just. Mr. Reynolds held up a hand. I don't care what it is, he cut in. If you're taking money on the side, that's a problem. The man's expression darkened slightly. She did something kind for me when no one else would. This is a thank you, not a business transaction. Mr. Reynolds gave a short laugh, shaking his head. Look, I've been running this place for 20 years. I've seen every sob story out there. People don't just give away money for no reason. Emily felt a rush of frustration. It's not like that, she said again, her voice more forceful. For a moment, there was silence. The tension in the air was thick, and Emily could feel the other customers sneaking glances their way. Finally, the man turned to her, his expression softer. You don't have to take it if you don't want to, he said quietly. But I hope you do. You deserve it. Emily looked down at the envelope again, her mind racing. She had worked here for years, pouring herself into long shifts, late nights, and double shifts just to make ends meet. And now, standing at a crossroads, she had to make a choice. Take the money and risk her job, or refuse it and keep struggling. just to keep people like Mr. Reynolds from doubting her intentions. Her heart pounded in her chest as she looked between them, feeling the weight of everything pressing down on her, and then she made her decision. Emily took a deep breath, her fingers tightening around the envelope. She looked up at the man, then at Mr. Reynolds, and finally at the familiar surroundings of the diner, the place she had spent so many long nights working, the place that had felt like a second home, even when it wasn't always easy. But right now, she realized something. This moment wasn't about the diner, or Mr. Reynolds, or even the whispers from curious customers. It was about her. Slowly, she met the man's gaze and gave him a small, grateful smile. "Thank you," she said, her voice steady but filled with emotion. She tucked the envelope into her apron pocket, her decision made. Mr. Reynolds let out a sharp breath, clearly unimpressed. "So that's how it is," he muttered. He shook his head and crossed his arms. "If you're going to start taking handouts, maybe this job isn't for you." Emily felt a wave of emotions crash over her. Fear, uncertainty, but also something else, something stronger, a sense of clarity. She straightened her shoulders. You know what? Maybe you're right. For the first time in a long time, she wasn't afraid of what came next. She had spent years struggling, barely making ends meet, afraid to take risks because she couldn't afford to fail. But standing here now, with a chance to change her life, she knew she had to take it. She pulled off her apron and set it on the counter. "I've given my all to this job, and I've loved working here, even when it was tough. But if kindness is something that gets questioned, maybe it's time for me to move on." A few customers had stopped eating, watching the moment unfold. Some of them looked surprised. Others nodded in quiet understanding. Mr. Reynolds sighed and rubbed his temple. "Your choice," he said, though his voice lacked its usual harshness. He turned away, muttering something under his breath, leaving Emily standing there, feeling both terrified and free. The man who had changed everything for her gave a small, knowing nod. "You have no idea how much I admire that," he said. Emily let out a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. "So, what happens now?" she asked, half laughing at the absurdity of it all. The man smiled. "That's up to you." And for the first time in a long time, Emily felt like she had a choice. In the weeks that followed, everything changed. With the money he had given her, she finally had the chance to breathe, to step back and figure out what she truly wanted. She enrolled in business classes, something she had always dreamed of, but never thought was possible. She found another job, one where she felt valued, where kindness wasn't questioned. But more than anything, she carried with her the lesson that one moment of compassion could change everything. Because in the end, it wasn't about the money, it was about the reminder that people still cared, that kindness still existed in the world, and that sometimes, when you least expect it, the good you put into the world comes back to you in ways you could never imagine. And as she walked into her first day of class, ready to build something new for herself, she couldn't help but smile, knowing that it had all started with a simple meal, a kind gesture, and a choice to believe in the goodness of people. Because sometimes life surprises you in the best possible way.